I had a spiritual experience when I took drugs and I just didn't feel like me anymore. And that's what I wanted. Anything to make me not feel like me. And I felt connected to the world, connected to the people I was with. I lived at rock bottom for years and years. You put pictures up and decorate rock bottom so it looks nice. And you pretend that that is the life that you want to be living and that is my truth. I stayed there for way too long. My son was in school and he said that they had a talk about alcoholics. And the teacher said, there's no such thing as a happy alcoholic. And he said, you don't know my mum.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode, I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction, and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Rae. Hi and welcome, fellow 12-steppers and spiritual seekers. Welcome to this edition of 12 Steps and 12 Questions. Very quickly, before we get to our guest Rae, if you or someone you know has a message to share and you would like to be on this pod, just ping me an email on 12steps12questions@gmail.com. That's 12steps 12questions@gmail.com, and we can have a chat and get things going. Rae, so glad that you're here today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Rae. I'm an alcoholic and addict, and my sobriety date is the 4th of the 4th, 2020.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Rae. Let's get right to it. Our first question of the 12 questions that I ask each guest is, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
No, I didn't. And that's always baffled me. I've always struggled with that because I couldn't understand why I was the way I was. And I actually hunted around in my past and I thought maybe I blocked something terrible out, or I was adopted. Just, it didn't make sense. But no, I had a really, really happy childhood. My parents aren't drinkers or drug users. I wasn't around that growing up. I had a happy childhood as such, but I didn't feel happy inside as long as I can remember.
Interesting. I mean, one of the things this podcast has taught me is that I often get the first answer is, no, I haven't had any adverse childhood experiences. And then, slowly but surely we discover that there have been many. Now, of course, I don't want to, if you haven't had any, then you haven't had any. But just to qualify these things, this is, as you quite rightly said, if one of your parents, for instance, is an alcoholic or an addict, but also something like loss really early on, poverty is another one, so adverse childhood experiences come in many forms. They don't have to necessarily come with a capital T trauma.
No. Yeah. But for me, that there isn't anything in my childhood. I did have traumas later on. I'd say from about 17, 18, things started happening. But as a child, no. I was at a very happy home and supportive family.
Mm. And here you are feeling left out, I suppose.
Yes. Yes. I always say it was like disease of more. And even as a child, I felt like they need to love me a bit more. They don't love me enough. I think they should love me more than my sister. I would get something that I felt I wanted or, praise. And then, no, it wasn't enough. I need more. I was never content and I was always looking for where I was going to be let down or put down. It was just...
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I've got one sister.
One sister, okay, great. Yeah, and did you get on with her when you were young?
When we were very little, we got on. She's younger than me, but she's always been like the older one. She's always more sensible and logical. And I've always been, my emotions just ruled me and they controlled my behavior. I didn't control my emotions. But I was awful to my sister. If you ask her what I was like, she'll say horrendous because of my temper problems. I would lash out. I would say awful things. I would be violent. I wasn't a nice sister or like a typical older sister that would look after their sister.
The younger sibling, yeah.
Yeah, there was always something not quite right.
So you were, quote unquote, a problem child?
Yes, not early on. I think as a young child, it came across as really intense shyness.
Oh,
I had a stammer when I was little. I couldn't speak properly, and I was incredibly shy. So in school, if a teacher spoke to me, I'd just go so red. They said in primary school they weren't sure if I was going to be able to go to comprehensive school because I was so shy, and they said oversensitive, which I know a lot of alcoholics and addicts are. It's one of our traits. But I'd be broken by a teacher telling me I hadn't put a full stop. They say, it's a really good poem, Rachel. It's really well structured. I like the rhyme, but you didn't put a full stop there. And then I wouldn't listen to any of the good stuff. It would be that one bit of criticism, and it would just break me. I was later diagnosed with ADHD and social anxiety disorder as an adult, and I can see that playing out in my childhood. But later on, teenager, I would have been classed as a problem child then.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the book says that, we are maladjusted to life, and would you say then that as a child you were already somewhat maladjusted to life?
Yes. I felt like I hadn't been given the script. I didn't fit in. I didn't know who I was. And so what I used to do is find someone that I thought a lot of people liked, a popular girl, and I would then try and imitate them. I would say that I liked the same thing as them. I was lying, but I would almost convince myself. But then the mask would fall at some point because I couldn't keep it up. But I kind of felt like the Truman Show, that film where...
Yeah.
He doesn't know that he's being filmed all the time. And it was a bit like that. I felt like something's not right. Maybe people are watching me. Maybe this is all a test and I'm going to find something out. But I didn't feel a part of. I was always on the outside looking in, trying to be liked, trying to be popular.
Yeah, making heavy going of life early on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, our question 2 is, what did the moment you first got hooked / the fun times look like? Bearing in mind we don't always have fun times, but many of us do. Now, here we are, and you are this child who's struggling with life, with shyness and ADHD, which is something that I'm very familiar with as well. And I think many of us are. And that can make things really, really difficult, especially if you don't know what it is that you have and the effects that it has and so on. It took me a long, long time to find that out and really realize how deep this actually runs. And at some point then, drugs, alcohol, or maybe behaviors are introduced into your life. And at first, they do something for you that you can't do for yourself, right? What did that like? Talk to us about that, please.
I'd have to say them separately because alcohol I found at 14 and I was at a youth club and I drank White Lightning, which is like a cheap cider, which a lot of us have, a first drink. And, just like the book says, men and women drink because they like the effect produced. And that was my very first drink. I didn't really care about what it tasted like. I wanted to get drunk. I wanted to see what it felt like to be drunk. And it was like the solution to everything. I could talk to people. I wasn't going red. I had this self-confidence. I could talk to boys. I could flirt, which I never could before. I was horrendous at it. I thought I was funny. I think I was funny. But you never know when you're looking back.
No, you really don't.
No. People would laugh. They might have been laughing at me, but I don't think so at the beginning. I think it did turn that way at the end. but I just felt connected to everyone and just at ease. It was like being really tense and then just, and then drugs was a little bit later on at 16, 17. The first drug I tried was hash. And if I look at my first experience, there were warning signs there and they pulled it out. They showed me this little brown block and I knew they were going to smoke it. I just grabbed it and shoved it in my mouth and ate it. And I had to be carried home. Like they had to carry me miles, but I just loved it. I had a spiritual experience, I would say, when I took drugs, and I just didn't feel like me anymore. And that's what I wanted. Anything to make me not feel like me. And I felt connected to the world, connected to the people I was with. And you get like a little community, don't you, of people who take drugs. And it was great. And
fellow seekers of some kind.
Yeah, fellow seekers. And you just feel a part of. And it's the whole process of picking it up. And then it was rolling spliffs. And I had a bong called Winston. And it was the whole lifestyle, not just the drug. And I felt like I belonged, like it says in the book when Bill talks of like I've arrived. And I was like, these are my people, they get me. And they don't judge me. And then I started hating and people who didn't take part in that kind of behavior, didn't like them anymore. And there was that separation. But it was a lot of good times. I went on from that to ecstasy. And I'm a huge music fan. And I was in the rave scene and loads of drum and bass, jungle music. I just loved all of that. And I wouldn't have kept taking stuff if I wasn't enjoying it. And I did. And I didn't see when it turned. I didn't see it coming.
The invisible line.
Oh, yeah. But and even now, I can't tell you when it was crossed and not. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, there was that time. I mean, this is straight from my own playbook, of course, you know, lots of hash and bongs and the ones with the, I don't know what you call it in English, the kicker, the one with the hole in it where you sort of, you know, have the air come out at the end and all that nonsense. And then, you know, the pills in particular were the first time I came into contact with something that that would be my spiritual experience, which was, you know, amphetamines, uppers, you know, which is the thing that I'm most allergic to, shall we say. I had a similar experience, like you were saying. I was funny. All of a sudden, I feel interesting and a bit sexier and a bit more, you know, and all of that, right? So it did all those things that I couldn't do for myself. So from what you were saying, you know, you were this child who had quite a tight corset almost around you, with feeling so shy and the ADHD probably sending your head all over the place and things. And here you are, you stop feeling these things. Was there any awareness around this at the time, or none whatsoever?
I wasn't really that aware. I just felt like this was the answer, and I found myself at last. I felt like I was only myself when I had drugs in my system. And I used to say that to people. I'd be like, oh, I'm me now. I would actually, like I was two different people.
Yeah. So there was awareness there.
Yeah. But not awareness, if you know what I mean. Like not deep awareness. When you look back in hindsight, you know, they say that we understand life backwards. And I can see it there. But at the time, yeah, just that there was a solution. And I felt happy. I did feel happy.
Yeah. A word here about awareness. Not the sort of awareness you get from going through an entire process and coming out at the end of it with the hindsight that gives us insight, as they say, right? So it's not that sort of awareness, but some things in my using and in recovery then have really caught me off guard, where I had, even while it was happening, I had no awareness, or I was entirely delusional about the extent of the problem, maybe, you know. And there was also at certain times, I remember this one time when I was, I don't know, I guess 18 or something. And I was sat in a car, in my own car. And I was trying to figure out for, I don't know, half an hour or so, whether I had actually smoked just maybe 10 minutes ago, whether I'd had a bong or not, right? And realized a little bit of awareness creeping in. And that's what I mean by that I actually can't really tell anymore if I've had some weed and some hash or if I didn't,
Yes.
So there was some of that awareness that was creeping in at that time.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Question 3, and every time I do this, I'm aware that this might cover quite a sort of long period of time, but let's go for it. Question 3 is, what were your worst consequences? And then finally, your rock bottom.
It's a good question, isn't it? Because my worst consequences weren't my rock bottom. In fact, my worst consequences pushed me further into my addiction. So one that stands out is a car accident I had. And I'd been up at Bristol, which is about an hour and a half drive from where I'm from, partying, a lot of drink, a lot of drugs. And then I drove back. And it was bank holiday. It was a bank holiday Sunday. And I drove back and I knew, and there's that part of you that's like, you shouldn't be doing this. And I crashed on the M4, going 80 miles an hour.
Ouch.
And I went into the central reservation. Car turned a few times and no one hit me, which is because, it was a Sunday on bank holiday. And the police turned up and I can still remember the policeman saying, you should be dead. And all I had was bruises on my knees from where I'd hit and I don't know if it was because I was passed out and I just went with it all, but I can remember him saying that. And I had really bad flashbacks after that.
What happened? Did you pass out at the wheel? You were driving and then you don't know what happened? Yeah.
Yeah, and I hit the central reservation. I can remember my mum and dad bringing my son to the hospital, who was about 2, and I can remember them walking in and just how bad I felt. I thought I was going to die. I was reliving it all the time and
it's a massive shock.
Having nightmares. And like a sane person, a normal person would think that's a warning sign. I need to stop. I need to slow down. But the only way I could cope with the flashbacks and the anxiety, and I hated myself as well. I was remembering my mum and my son walking in and thinking I could have been dead then and my son wouldn't have a mum anymore. The only way I could cope with all these feelings was by getting off my head, by drinking more, by taking more drugs.
Did you frequently then just kind of have these sort of horror visions that would come to you that, I don't know, I'm making one up for you here, that your son comes into the room and mummy is dead and all those things?
Yes, that was a regular occurrence, especially in using days. And I would actually see things happen. And then I would be like, Rachel, why are you imagining that? There's something wrong with you that you're picturing that stuff happening in your head. And then I'd be like, I'm going insane. I know. I need to numb myself. I need to do that. That was a massive one for me. And another one. Go on.
Can I interject very quickly? Because this is a bit more under my skin than I perhaps would have liked. In that these sort of horror visions, for lack of a better word, right? Sometimes I get them still when I'm sober, and the moment that I would sort of something, I don't know, I'm out with the dog or something like that, and then nothing even has to happen particularly, but I catch myself going there for some reason. Wonder if this is about addiction or just my head being a bit, funny.
I have it as well. I do have it now. And sometimes like a memory will come back and I'll have that picture in my head and it'll be like, oh my gosh. And like, I'll tense up, my skin will crawl, I'll feel sick. But what I think now is that maybe God is saying, remember that? remember what that's like. And it's almost like a bit of an insurance policy. Keep doing what you're doing. You don't have to go back there. You don't have to have more stuff added to this. That's what I try and think then. And I double down on something in the program or speak to another alcoholic or addict.
Sorry, I interrupted you. So you were going to go for another of the worst experiences, the worst consequences.
Yeah, there's a few. There was one where I was on loads of pills and you just feel lovely. And I climbed out of the top window of like a block of flats. Didn't care at the time, but I can remember falling and grabbing onto the drain pipe. And I'd just been like that and then climbing back and carried on. But then the next day, like we just talked about, those flashbacks where I did fall and I was running through all of that stuff, which was another time where I could have died. And then a blackout was probably, I used to find them terrifying. And there was one in particular quite near the end where I went to a funeral and, as you do, I went to a wake and then I have absolutely I woke up at home.
Hammered at the wake?
Yeah, oh yeah. I can remember, doing really disrespectful things. But just waking up and looking at the time and it's been like 8 hours has gone. I've got I had cuts all over my hands, sick all over the house. My coat was like hung up on the door, which I'd never do, and it was too high for me to do. So I was like, someone else has been here. And I was just terrified. I was like, what's happened here? And then again, a normal person would think, sort yourself out, Rachel. I got on the phone, found out where some people were that were partying and got in a taxi straight up there to carry on.
Yeah, it's a word about blackouts. I'd had mini ones to start with, 20 minutes, maybe an hour or so, wake up where I was just, oh, wow, what time is it? Oh, I'm still in my sofa, on my bed, wherever. But then the bigger ones, the ones where you wake up a day later or half a day later, they are absolutely terrifying. I'm looking at my phone, who did I call? Look at my bank app, to see, where did I get money out? Where was I? Have I been driving? Is the car still outside? All those sort of things. And those were the things towards the end that really, really pushed me also towards recovery. And if you, dear listener, if you are experiencing this and come into the room, so it's a big sign. It really is a big sign. So back to you, Rachel. So you quite a few really bad consequences there that you, as you said, didn't heed. You didn't heed the call. And then towards your rock bottom.
Yeah. So the rock bottom, I heard someone describe once. She said she lived at rock bottom for 10 years. And I thought, gosh, that's just like me. And you put pictures up and decorate rock bottom so it looks nice. And you pretend that is the life that you want to be living, and that is my truth. I lived at rock bottom for years and years and just was so delusional that it was not a nice way of living, that I stayed there for way too long. But in the end, I think I'd only been on a 2-day bender, which I'd had longer ones. But I was sick quite a lot. I used to call them tactical spews because I'd be sick and then I'd come back in and be like, I can carry on. Mm. And
self-induced spews or?
No,
they just came as they came.
Too much of everything. My body just being like, get it out. And I think it was MDMA that time. And I couldn't stop being sick. And I looked in the mirror and the whites of my eyes had turned blood red. They'd burst. The blood vessels in my eyes had burst. So they were blood red. And I felt like a cast member of The Walking Dead. And I was like, I'm not alive. Like I'm surviving. I'm functioning, but I'm just dead inside. My kids were due to be dropped back in 20 minutes. And I was like, what are you doing? And I just had enough. I just got to the point where I didn't want to carry on anymore. And I reached out to someone who I'd seen on social media got sober that used to be worse than me, one of those. And I messaged her and said, I need help. And she responded, and the best message I've ever sent in my life.
Yeah. It's that precious moment that it seems impossible to artificially bring about, right? Sometimes I guess maybe it works with interventions, I don't know, but this moment, and I see it with people who come into the rooms, and of course, in my own experience, that moment of when you truly have enough, that moment of when the whole big crack or bang or whatever it is comes and you go, I cannot go further than this.
Yeah, it's being smashed, isn't it? It talks in the big book, about being smashed. And I think before I'd have like a little crack maybe, and then I would glue it back and be like, no, it's okay. A little consequence, a little accident. But when you're completely smashed, it's actually a gift, because that's when, a power can come in.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting, isn't it? Is that through that brokenness is where the light comes in, even though by God, it doesn't feel like that on the day.
Oh, no.
No? It's the worst moment in the world and you think it's the end of everything when really it isn't. But we don't know that at that point.
It's beautiful.
You're quite right. It is really beautiful. Our question 4. At your worst, did you ever want to die? Did you consider suicide?
No, I didn't consider suicide, but I didn't care if I lived or died. So I would do things where I knew it could be the end. I would keep taking things when I knew I shouldn't be. I used to have like an Apple Watch, and it tracks your heart.
You weren't wearing that, were you? Oh, God.
Quite regularly, I'd have these alarms going off, and it's like, your heart rate is exceeding this and you haven't moved. You need to get medical help. And I just take it off and throw it across the room. And so I never contemplated taking my own life, but I felt like if I do die, it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. It's quite similar to my experience at the time. I didn't have I don't know whether courage is the right word. To a degree, I suppose it is, but I didn't, but I knew, we've often talked about it on this podcast, the level of using that we do is just, you could go over, right? If you take X amount of stuff and you mix it with X amount of other stuff and so on and so forth. And if even your sort of tech devices are starting to yell at you, and you know that you could go over, but there was a sense for me, just as what you were saying, that, you know what, I was so far gone, really, in my heart of hearts, I was so far gone that if I wouldn't wake up the next day, I'd be all right.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, it's a step removed from wanting to take one's life, I suppose, but there is a suicidal aspect to it, I think.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I think you lie to yourself, don't you, that you're not. But it's when you know you're taking way too many Valium. And I know people who've died from taking 4 Valium and where it's gone wrong. And it's like, well, it's a bit like roulette, Russian roulette, isn't it? It happens. But I didn't mean to do it.
Yeah.
That kind of thinking.
Did you, I'm hearing that you lost friends and people around you to drugs, and that didn't scare you away either. No,
it didn't. I would use that as an excuse to go and do more.
How'd you excuse that? What's the quote unquote reasoning?
I was very good at it. It talks. I read in a meeting the other day about being the manufacturer of misery, and I would create misery from other people's misery. So if a friend, I can think of a friend now, died and it was a Valium overdose. And then it would be like, well, I'm so upset about this that's happened. And I would phone people, I'd take people hostage, emotionally hostage, and talk at them. I'd get a load of drugs in. I'd have to have someone with me and then just use and talk about it. But it wasn't me. And it wasn't, he wasn't a family member. But instead of actually caring and being a support to people who were very close to him, no, it was about me. It was about me. And it's very disrespectful to be using drugs to remember someone who's just died of it. But I thought that was an okay thing to do. I would just find any excuse to rationalize and justify my drug use and my drinking to make it seem like, oh, she needs it.
Yeah. Classic addict behavior, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Making it about you, making that pain that other people have, making that about you. I feel terrible, Before we get to our question 5, just one quick word. We mentioned Valium. We mentioned, I don't know how many pills. Let's make it very clear that we don't endorse any kind of dosage of Valium, except for the one that your doctor prescribes to you, right?
Yes.
If you needed it. So it's really important that, because it's so different, everything is so different about who can take what and how much and so on. And, we're not doctors here.
No, I was never prescribed Valium. It was always street Valium.
Yeah.
I was never prescribed it.
Yeah, and there's no safe dosage of that, that's for sure.
No.
Next question is question 5. What other methods did you try to get sober before finding the rooms? If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
Oh, a lot. A lot. So I had a lot of counselling. I had art therapy, psychotherapy, CBT. I tried, because I've grown up in the church. My dad was a pastor. So I would pray in that head before I was connected to a power, before I understood it. But I would, the desperate prayers, if you get me out of this, and then forget all about relationships. If I'm with that person, I'll stop. If I'm with someone who doesn't take any drugs, or then if I am with someone who takes different kinds, jobs, and then I would try with alcohol. I thought rosé wine was the problem. So don't drink rosé wine. And I'd switch to beer. And then I'd try water between every one. One of the best ones was taking the car. I'll drive, and then I just have one. And it's obvious what happens. What always ended up happening. Switch drugs, I'll just smoke weed. That'll be okay. Anything, writing down promises.
And how long would these things then work for? Because some not at all. Because some things worked for me for a little while. I mean, a few days maybe.
No, not at all. I think fear sometimes a little bit.
Yeah.
But no, I had a stack of self-help books. I'd read the first chapter, and this is going to be the answer, and I'm going to start journaling, and I'm going to do this. But I couldn't stick to anything at all, which is part of my mental health diagnosis as well. I remember sticking a picture of my sons on the fridge because I thought, I'll see their faces, and I won't do it, because I love my boys. I loved them then as much as I do now, but love's not enough to stop the mental obsession and to drive that drives us back to drink and take drugs. And I just, within a day, I took it off. Nothing worked. None of my attempts to control it worked, especially at the end. It was crazy.
Must be difficult it is difficult for those people around us to really get their heads around this, if you have two boys that you love, so very much, and that you can't stop for them. But we know that what the book says about this. But sometimes I try to put myself into the shoes of those people around us to kind of think, Mom, why can't you stop for me? Or Dad, why can't you stop for me? Or something like that.
I know, it's awful, and it drives us further into the cycle of alcoholism, I think, because it's that shame, the remorse, the horror that we wake up with of what have I just done? My kids have put a blanket over me. They found me on the floor. They've cleaned me up. How can I live with myself? I know. I'll have a drink. It's just, and anyone looking from the outside who's not an alcoholic, who's not an addict, it makes no sense. And it didn't make any sense to me until I learned about it.
Yeah. The cycle of alcoholism and of addiction is mad. And I find it difficult. I mean, even though there is we know about the cogs, don't we? We learn about them, the phenomenon of craving and mental obsession and so on. We know how it works. And still, there's always a part of me that thinks it's a disease that I will never really be able to understand fully with my head, just like the solution.
No. Yeah, and I think because I think part of it is a spiritual disease. And I think a human mind, I don't think we can ever get our heads around spiritual stuff. We can get a glimpse, but not fully.
This, segues nicely onto our question 6, which is, did you struggle with the word God? So this is, you've come into the rooms, and if you're anything like me, you're reading step 1, powerless. Okay. Yeah. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Okay. Maybe. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. No, thank you. Right. What was it like for you? And you're a pastor's daughter. So. Yeah.
I have quite a different perspective, because a lot of people in the rooms don't believe in God. They're atheist or agnostic. But for me, I believed in God, but I had a very skewed image of God. So my God then was a bearded man up in the sky, apart from the world, looking down on the world. And I felt like he hated me. And that was because I hated myself. But I felt like if there is a God, and I did believe there was God, why would he want to help someone like me, who's done the things that I've done, who can't be a good mum, who's let people down, who's sat in a church, coming down and being sick in the toilet, trying to put on this front, who's lied so much, who's stolen. I couldn't grasp that a God of the universe, a power, would want anything to do with someone like me. And that's what I struggled with when I came in. That's what I had to really work out.
Yeah. Let's talk about self-loathing here for a little while. It's such a massive feature of certainly of our addiction and of what we do. And then, of course, there is more self-loathing because of what we do. And then it becomes the cycle that we just talked about, right? But do you think that, slightly off script maybe, that self-loathing in and of itself is part of our problem? Because I consider it to be part of my problem to begin with. What's your take?
Definitely. I see that as a huge block to me connecting with my higher power, because until you can forgive yourself and like yourself, loving yourself, it's a stretch for a lot of us, isn't it? I don't even know if I can say that yet. But liking myself, I think until you're there, how can you believe that a power greater than yourself is going to help you? And I think the self-loathing and self-hate drives the addiction as well, because it's self-sabotage and it's self-destruct, cloaked in enjoyment and a mask of fun. But really, it's you're killing yourself slowly.
Yeah. Well, not so slowly. Yeah, it's interesting. I've often, when I've spoken to other addicts and alcoholics and so on, and fellow 12-steppers about this, that I find self-loathing is a huge, huge part, and something that only recently I have come to appreciate a bit more is that I can like myself just a little bit better since I've come into recovery, right? And even if, loving oneself seems to be such an abstract thing for me anyway, so it's a bit, okay. But it's okay. It's okay for me to look after myself now and say that I'm all right because I'm doing this. I'm in recovery and I'm putting in an effort and I've connected, right? That sort of helped me a little bit with this, to just not really be stuck in that place of not liking oneself, really. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's very hard to do work on yourself and do the steps if you loathe yourself, isn't it? Like, why are you going to do the work? I'm not worth it anyway. So little by little, I think it opens up and, I haven't been an absolute twat today.
Yeah.
And you build on that, and it's like, I actually helped someone. Like, wow. And I think the steps is beautiful because it turns our most shameful moments into a gift that we can get alongside someone and say, I've done that too. I've been where you are. I know how to get out.
Were you on your step 4?
I wasn't, I wasn't. And that is something that I've been thinking about because I've got another one coming up because I'm going through the steps again at the moment. And I wondered if I would put it on there before. I didn't think that was an option last time. So it's definitely something I'm going to explore.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. I think something to, ask your sponsor, I suppose, because, you could argue that maybe there's a bit too much self-indulgence in that, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword, I suppose.
Yeah.
So you didn't struggle with the word God when you came in, but you struggled with the God concept, with your concept of it.
Yeah.
And what is it like today, which is our question 7? How do you experience your higher power today? And it's also a good time to share any God moments if you want it.
Do you know the turning point for me was realizing when we went through We Agnostics was that the fundamental idea of God is inside each and every one of us, and learning that God was here all along, not an outside thing, but an internal presence within me. And that I believe my higher power, my God, loved me in my most shameful moments when I was doing the worst things as much as he does now, that I don't have to earn that love, that love is already there. And that just blew my mind. It was like a huge light bulb moment for me. Now, how do I experience God? Through other people a lot of the time. Through words other people will say to me. I think the way I experience God and see God the most is in the rooms, is watching people recover, of sitting opposite a miracle, of seeing someone come in completely battered and you think, oh my gosh. And then seeing them 3 months later and like a light on in their eyes and just this beautiful transformation that happens. And it's like, how can I doubt that there's a God when that's just happened in front of me?
Yeah, the healing that we witness is astounding, yeah.
And I love a speaker called Bob D.
Of course.
And he tells a story about like this guy who used to light the lampposts when they used to have to go and like physically light them all, and how you wouldn't see him, you wouldn't see this man, but you'd see where he'd been because the lights were coming on. And that's how I feel about God. It's like, I don't see God, but I see where he's been, and it's just beautiful. And I experience God every day. It's the most important part of my life today. If that is my focus, hanging out with God, developing my relationship with God, focusing on my spiritual growth, then everything else falls into place. And I see God in nature. I love going out walking. I love mountains. I know, Silvio, you've been up in the Brecon Beacons.
Yes.
Not hiking though, but no. I'm up there and it's like, oh, this is my church. Like God's creation. And just in little things, he's got a very funny sense of humour. I'll find something will happen and I'll be like, very funny, how things work out when you put your life in God's hands, how the way he takes you. So yeah, it's a relationship for me, and a relationship has to be two-way. When you meet someone, and I've got friends and all they do is talk about themselves. They'll never ask you anything. And that's what I used to be like with God. This is my list. This is what I want. I want this, that, and the other. And then off. And now it's like being quiet and resting in that and taking direction before I even pray now. So quiet. So I'm quiet and I ask God to come into that moment and see what he wants me to pray about, rather than here's my list. And it's that connection and the two-way thing I have to remember all the time and working on it.
I think it's important to point out, I mean, I love what you said, and and it shows, it tells me that, this is something that you've been cultivating for quite a little while,
Yes.
Bit by bit, day by day, and so on and so forth. When you started where I started, which was like, I'm kneeling, I don't really know why, right?
Yeah.
And I know I'm supposed to do this, so let me just, okay, even though I was quite comfortable with meditation, and so sitting still wasn't actually that big a problem, but the actual kind of going, okay, I need to say something. I need to sort of, because I was taught that you do the 10 and 10, the 10 minutes of listening and 10 minutes of praying, and so at first it was just, one, it was awkward, and two, I felt a bit like, at the beginning, it was a bit like, okay, well, I need $1,000 for this, please. And if only this would happen and that would happen, and if only she would be speaking to me now or instead of not, and so on. But, I don't think that we should be too downhearted on ourselves there.
No.
It's a beginning, and no matter what beginning it is, if it done, the book says so, if done earnestly, then God will meet you there. And this has definitely been my experience. And hopefully you move on from there a little bit and start praying for other people, for instance, which is a new concept for me.
Yeah, other people. Yeah, my first prayers were always, for the first month, please help me stay sober today. That was it. And then thank you for keeping me sober.
Yeah. I still say that every morning and every evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Question 8, and this is quite sort of current with you doing the steps again, but question 8 is, which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you?
I hated step 4 and 5. I hated, because I lived not even a double life. I was these different people, and they would never meet, and I'd make sure those people never saw what I was like with those people. I used to have a recurring nightmare, and it was that I'd buried someone. So I don't know how I'd killed them. I'd buried someone, and I was about to be found out. And it was this awful nightmare. I'd wake up like in bed, like hardly able to breathe, like, oh my gosh. And then I only realize it's a dream. And it's like, oh. But I think that was me, looking back now, worried about people are going to find out what my parents are going to find out, that I'm taking drugs, work are going to find out. It was this juggling act all the time. And I kept secrets. I lied to everyone. So the thought of even writing it down, an inventory of my most shameful moments, because it's important in it to get the stuff that keeps us awake, the stuff that makes us cringe. We need to get it out. To even put that on paper terrified me. I thought I was going to go to the grave with this stuff. And I was very good at lying to myself. So I would convince myself I hadn't done things. That didn't happen. That would be the advice I used to give my friends. Just pretend it didn't happen. And it's fine, and squash it all down. It don't work. That doesn't work. So I started writing my step 4 inventory, and I can remember sending a picture to my sponsor to check I was doing the right thing. And she was like, why does it look so pretty? And I'd done all this color coding. And,
oh, wow.
And now I think it was awful stuff I was writing, but it was almost like my life, putting on this facade of making it look nice. If it looks nice, maybe it will deflect from the words that I'm actually writing. She's like, stop that now. And then when it came to step 5, to sharing it, I think I cried for 2 weeks writing it, and knowing she only gave me 2 weeks, which I think is good. Because if I'd been given I would have had step 4 flu if I'd been left to my own devices.
Step 4 flu. I love this. I hadn't heard this before, actually.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, yeah, step 4 flu. I'll take it.
You can get very ill doing step 4, and I'll do it next week. I'm not feeling right. So the time limit was good. And so 2 weeks, and I just cried, and I imagined all this sort of stuff. So I thought, she's going to relapse. My sponsor's going to relapse, and then she'll post it all online, or she'll blackmail me. She's going to want money. And then I thought, because I'd heard that I was going to be told my part in things, and I've got some trauma with domestic violence, and I thought, she's going to tell me that it's my fault that my husband was violent. And I planned this whole speech, and I was going to throw the big book across the kitchen and storm out. This is what my head's like seeing all this stuff happen.
No drama then?
No drama, yeah. I'm not a drama queen, not a diva. And then I did it though. And that is a higher power that even made me drive there and turn up. And she was brilliant. And she said, what you dread in telling me the most, let's do that first. So I did, told her, and she just said, I've done that too. And it took the nerves, and it didn't go as I thought it would at all. It was a really powerful experience, and that's when the desire to drink left or use drugs.
Yeah. Same here, actually. Steps 4 and 5 was when I first really glimpsed the light.
Yeah.
I go, oh, wow. I can breathe. Yeah.
Yes.
It's incredibly powerful.
It
Very
is.
powerful practice. Absolutely. Our next question, question 9. Which character defects give you most trouble?
Oh, it's the favourite ones, isn't it? That pop up all the time. Judgmental, being judgmental. Justified anger is a nightmare for me because I like it. And it's really hard when it's like, well, it's fair enough that you're angry, but we can't afford it. We can't afford to be angry. So I find that really hard, and I need help to do it. I have to do step 10 regularly to spot some of this stuff coming up. Those two, the character assassination is another one I like doing. So if someone does one thing, I will then write them off completely, and assassinate their whole character. I think it's like a self-protection thing. But I'm aware of these things now. And I still have to be careful, as we spoke earlier, about the self-loathing, self-hating. I have to be really careful not to dwell on the negatives of things. And luckily, we're in a fellowship and we help each other. And I've got a sponsor that I have to be honest with.
And of course, we have steps 6 and 7.
Yes.
To help us with these things.
Oh, yeah.
What people often call the forgotten steps, right?
Yeah, but they're the ones probably that we're doing the most every day. Well, we should be, or I get in trouble.
Yeah.
And I thought once I asked God to remove my defects, they'd be gone. Like I was going to be hovering, floating around like the saint. And no, it's wrong. And someone described it as like whack-a-mole, and you spot one and then another one pops up and you have to smack ones. It's constant. 6 and 7 are constant.
Yeah. I think for me, step 6 is really the one that is most important. It is a good reason why it is there for step 7, because frankly, especially with justified anger and those sort of things, I don't see anything wrong.
Yeah.
So remove what? So it is really, really important that step for that reason, and stuff to practice for, well, forever. Yeah. Our next question is question 10. And what is the best thing recovery has given you?
It's a good question, isn't it? I think peace. I've never known peace. Never known, a moment where I just feel like everything's okay until I was in recovery. I always had this impending doom. So I would be anxious, even if there wasn't anything to be anxious about. It'd be like something bad is about to happen. I can feel it. And like this darkness around me. And when that lifted, and just to be like, at this moment, I'm okay. And I've got everything that I need. And content is an incredible feeling that I'd never experienced until I'd gone through the 12 steps. And then on another level, I'd say the relationship I've got with my boys now. And that is just such a gift that I can be a positive person in their lives. And I'm present. I was never present. I was never here. Even if I was here, I wasn't. I was, my head was somewhere else planning and that. But my son was in school and he said that they had a talk about alcoholics. And the teacher said, there's no such thing as a happy alcoholic. And he said, you don't know my mum.
Oh.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, and that he actually could see I was happy. And I like that alcoholic's not a shameful word for them to say that my mum, because they can see how actually being an alcoholic and working the program has given them their mum that I was always supposed to be, and happy. I don't shout at them. I'm not that horrible presence that was here before.
How do you relate to them about your addiction and your alcoholism? Are you entirely, how old are they? And are you entirely open in your relationship with them about your experiences and your alcoholism?
About the alcoholism, they saw a lot of that firsthand, and they would see me drinking. I was sneakier. I hid the drugs from them. But they would often see the results of me being drunk. So open about that. They do know that drugs is part of my story. If they ask me something, I'm honest with them. I did amends with them. I waited 2 years, and I was really careful with the amends about not dragging stuff up that they might not want to remember. So, and it was mad.
Very delicate.
It was mad because the only thing that they said when I said, what was it like for you? And they said a difficult thing was my anger and that my eyes used to bulge. They said it wasn't the drinking, it was my behaviours and how I was, which was hard to hear, but I needed to hear that.
Question 11. What would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict?
I say it's really important to get qualified, to qualify yourself. It's the only disease where you have to diagnose yourself. And there's 2 questions that I was told, which was when you honestly want to, do you find you can't quit entirely? I couldn't actually answer that because I don't know if I ever honestly wanted to stop. I wanted the consequences to stop. I wanted to control it. Did I honestly want it to? I don't know. And I managed to stop when I was pregnant with both of my sons. So I thought that both times I haven't got a problem. I'm not an alcoholic because I stopped for 9 months. And then, but straight away, as soon as I could, I was off, and it was worse than before. It wasn't like a slow build-up back. It was bam. It was like a ski jump. There was no soft approach. It was worse after the break. So that was my experience of the first question, and I couldn't really answer it. But luckily, there's a second question, and it was, if when you start to drink, do you lose control over the amount you take? That was me. Absolutely, that was me to a T. So as soon as I took a sip, as soon as I even had a bottle of wine in my hand, I'd have to order Coke.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
They were like best friends. I couldn't do one without the other.
2 peas in a pod.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was mad because, I wouldn't even have started drinking, and it would just because I had it. And I lost all control, and I lost the power of choice, which is an alcoholic. Have you lost the power of choice over whether you drink or not? Yeah. Or whether I use or not. My addiction, my alcoholism decided when I drank or not. I could remember crying in the shop, like trying not to look at the wine. I couldn't physically look at it in a shop. I found it so difficult. And because the choice had gone, there was no thought process in it even. A lot of the time it was just bam, bam, bam. So that's how I knew I was an alcoholic, because that I couldn't control it. It was controlling me. And if you are, welcome home. Because I always said that I was a black sheep of the family. Like I didn't belong anywhere until I came here, until I came into the rooms. And suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only person who thinks like that. And just the feeling of finding your tribe and people that you can say anything to and they don't think you're a nutter. They'll laugh or they'll say, yeah, me too. And just that feeling of finding your place. And I'd say it is the best thing I ever did. And one day you'll see it's a gift. That's what I'd say. Yeah. Strap in and enjoy the ride.
There's a whole flock of black sheep waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we got heard.
Yeah, that's right. And our last question for today, which is our question 12. What do you want your higher power to say to you, quote unquote, at the pearly gates?
Do you know, really weirdly, it's the same thing as I just said, and it's welcome home. Because I think that after I die, when I meet my higher power, I think it will feel like going home. And it'll be that this is where I should be. And just feeling love, acceptance. Yeah, and a sense of going home. Exactly the same, which is strange that it's the same thing. I'll think about that.
I think it's lovely. And probably no coincidence either.
No, it's not. It's not. It talks about utopia, finding utopia here and now, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, what is it? I think the last bit of Bill's story, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And maybe heaven, if you believe in heaven or afterlife, is not a separate thing. And that it is part of all the same thing.
All of it above our spiritual pay grade, as my sponsor says. And,
yeah.
I have a friend outside the rooms, who always says that when he dies, he wants the answers to all his questions or his money back. So I think it's a lovely way of looking at it, or a funny way of looking at it. I'm not quite sure that's the way it works, though.
Yeah.
Rae, it's been so wonderful talking to you today. I really want to thank you for being here today, for sharing your experience, your strength, your hope. You've been so generous with your sharing and so courageous. Thank you so very much for being my guest on 12 Steps and 12 Questions today.
Thank you very much, Silvio. Thank you.
We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-Step Recovery Program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-Step Fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not for profit. And you know this next bit. It's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.